So if you're a newbie at fixing a riding lawnmower and you just don't know where to start, you might want to stick around for this one. I'll be covering my top 10 industry tips and tricks for getting your mower back up and running again. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Now the first thing I would check to see is do I actually have any gas? I know this might sound obvious, but you could have in your mind, but when I parked it, it had gas. But if the needle and seat in the carburetor started leaking, it could have leaked all the gas out since you parked it. Now obviously if it leaks into the oil, you need to pull the dipstick out and smell the oil to see if it smells like gas. If it does, get rid of it and change the oil. Now this next one is a real easy one to check, and you'll only need to worry about this if you turn your key and the engine doesn't crank, but you might hear a click or something like that, is to check to make sure nothing happened to the engine. Usually you can get to the top of the flywheel like this one right here. Just grab it and turn it, make sure everything's turning freely. If yours is guarded with a shroud, then you can probably get to it from the bottom pulley like this right here and just grab it and turn the engine like this. All right, so next thing you'll want to know, is my engine actually cranking over, or do I hear a funny click and the engine is not cranking over? Sounds like this. Now what that is the starter relay is clicking, and if the battery's dead, it can click and try to turn the engine over, but it actually doesn't have enough juice to do so. Of course, the starter relay itself can go bad, and I'm going to talk about that here shortly. But if your battery's dead, you need to check the date on it. These batteries will usually last about 2 years. This one is a December 21 battery. All right, so now also you want to check your connections, make sure they're free of corrosion, make sure they're tight. Most of these are a 7/16. If you're finding any value in this video, please subscribe to this channel. I come out with videos like this as often as I can. Now one other thing you can do is if you have a voltmeter like this, you can check the voltage on the battery. They usually run between 12.5 and 12.8, somewhere in that neighborhood. This is 12.6 at the moment, so this battery's in good shape. If you've got 11 anything, then your battery is low. If you don't have a meter like that, it's a good investment. You can get a cheap one at Harbor Freight for right around $7. Now, if your battery is low, you can try to charge it, but if it's over 2 years old, chances are it's toast. All right, so as you can see here, I've taken the battery out. Now, another thing that goes along with electrical is pretty much every mower I've ever seen has an inline fuse on one of the smaller lines, not the heavy battery line. This one is a 20-amp fuse. This runs your accessories, right? Your headlights, your key switch, all that good stuff. If that fuse is blown, it's not going to start, right? If you're hearing a click, though, it's probably not the fuse because that means you've got power on your starter relay. And on this model, this is a Troy-built Pony, the starter relay is you got to take the battery out and move one of these battery supports right here out of the way so you can get your hand in there. And the starter relay is back here. Now right behind the frame right here is a bolt, a 3/8 bolt, and you just take that bolt loose right here. Now one thing that you can do if you suspect this is bad anyway is take a screwdriver. Now be careful with this. I'm not wearing a glove. If this was live, I'd be wearing a glove because what this will do is it'll throw a spark out and you don't want your hand right there. All right, so if you short that out with a screwdriver, that's going to engage your starter. It's going to turn the engine over, and you can test all that up front. Another thing that you can do is check the connection on the starter and make sure that connection is tight. But if it is, when you do this, it should engage the starter, the engine should turn, it'll probably even start. If you're hearing a click, that means you're getting power to these terminals right here, right, that goes to the coil inside the relay. And if you're not hearing a click, you'll want to check these to make sure you're getting your 12 volts when you're turning the key switch. Now another thing that you can do is if you're afraid of the screwdriver trick is use your voltmeter and put one side to ground. You'll have to hook the battery back up. And one side of this should be battery power, and then the other side will be the 12 volts when you hit the key. That's a safe way to do it as well. But that won't test the current that runs through there. That'll just test that there is voltage going across. Okay, this next one should be pretty obvious, but I figured I'd mention it anyway. Your battery checks out good, but you still don't have any cranking or clicking either for that matter. You'll want to check things like your parking brake is pushed in all the way, your blade is disengaged, you're sitting on the seat, obviously. Now, if you've checked all those things and they all check out correct, you could have an electrical issue like a bad safety switch or a switch that's not being pushed in all the way or released all the way. These are all things that can play a factor in this, or you could have a bad starter solenoid, as I mentioned earlier. All right, if your engine is cranking over fine, but it still won't start, and you have a larger engine that uses an external fuel pump like this one, you may have a bad fuel pump. What you can do is take the discharge hose loose that goes to the carburetor, pull it loose, and put this into a glass jar, or any kind of jar, whatever. Crank the engine over. You should see a nice stream coming out of that hose. If it's weak or nothing at all, then you may have a bad fuel pump. All right, so many mowers have a fuel solenoid at the bottom of the carburetor. Now, if you turn the key on and off, you should be able to pick up a faint click. Now, if you're not hearing it, you might want to pull this off and take a look and make sure the plunger is moving back and forth. Just pull the wire off of there. They usually come off pretty easy. And be ready with a rag, because this has got gas in it and it's going to leak. Also, you'll want to pinch the fuel line off with some vice grips or something, because this is a gravity-fed tank. Now, you'll want to hook the power wire back up. See how freely it moves by hand? Right there. But you can see that when you're turning the key on and off, too. See that? If that doesn't do that, then this thing is bad. A lot of times if you let fuel sit in there, it'll rust it out and it won't move freely and it'll be junk. All right, so next you might run across a situation where your engine will crank just fine, but it still won't start. Well, if that happens, take a look in your gas tank. Do you see water in the bottom of the gas tank? Does your gas look cloudy? If your gas looks cloudy, it could have water in it. Are you using a gas can that's been stored out in the sun and can get condensation in it? You'll dump it right in your gas tank if that happens. Or if you leave the mower out in the sun, you can get condensation in the gas tank. I like to store things either completely full or completely empty. I also like to use ethanol-free fuel, and I use this blue Startron stabilizer stuff right here. Of course, there's other brands available. Also, does your gas stink? Now, I know fresh gas doesn't smell very good. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about bad gas. It has a very distinct bad odor. Once you smell it, you won't forget. So if you've left your mower sit for a pretty long while and your gas tank has that nasty smell, you'll probably need to pull out the gas tank, flush it out with water, and change your fuel lines and change your fuel filter too. You don't want to use this gas tank as it is, just drain it out and put fresh gas in it, because chances are you'll contaminate your newly cleaned carburetor. Okay, so if your mower has been sitting for an extended period of time and you've just cleaned up your gas tank, as I outlined in the previous tip, you'll probably need to pull off your carburetor and go through that and get that cleaned up as well. Depending on how long your lawnmower has been sitting, these carburetors could be ruined, but I've been able to save 90% or better of all the ones that I've fooled with, so there's a pretty good chance that you can just clean that up and it'll be fine. One thing that you can do that'll kind of test the carburetor is spray a little bit of starting fluid right there in the intake where the air cleaner is. And if the engine starts and then dies after it runs out of starting fluid, of course, if you've got good gas in the gas tank, then chances are your carburetor's bad. In doing this, you've also tested the engine's ability to run, and you've tested the spark plug as well. I've got lots of videos on carburetors, so probably I've got one that's going to fit your setup. All right, so last but not least, this one is an easy one. Make sure your spark plug is clean. Sometimes you can clean these up with a wire brush. Sometimes they're just ruined, and it's better off to replace it because it's cheap anyway. And make sure your air filter is fairly clean. A dirty air filter can make your engine either not start at all or just run like garbage. All right, well, I hope this video has been helpful for you. Thanks for watching.